4 centuries ago, rumours emerged of a foreign prince using witchcraft to pillage his way across England. But people at the time were more scared of his dog, a small poodle said to possess magical powers. The dog was so feared that opponents would seek it out on the battlefield, fearing that he was powerful enough to decide the outcome of the English Civil War. It's now an often overlooked chapter of history, but to people of the time this magical dog was a very real threat to their existence, and still today some believe it had supernatural abilities. The English Civil War broke out in the mid-17th century. It was a power struggle between the king and members of parliament. Both sides knew the stakes were high. In fact, parliament ended up cutting off the king's head. So leaders on both sides were desperate to engage powerful allies from abroad. The king had an advantage in this area, the advantage of being massively inbred. For countless centuries, members of European royal families would marry each other to secure alliances. Marriage was one of the strongest forms of diplomacy, so even as the gene pool grew smaller, they didn't stop. This had the effect of rendering European royalty what can only be described as crazy inbred. It got to the point where many royal houses were plagued by horrific diseases. That's how much they couldn't resist mating with their own cousins. And these were the people in charge of society. Imagine the weird stuff normal people were doing. But anyway, I should get back to the main video topic, because otherwise I could spend all day talking about inbreeding. So King Charles was able to use his crazy inbred connections to bring in powerful European nobles to fight on his side. One of the most important was Prince Rupert of the Rhine. He was a German prince, which might sound great, but he was born at the start of the 30 Years' War, a massive conflict that really wasn't good for some royals in Central Europe. So Rupert ended up being exiled. Luckily he survived. Then as a teenager he got involved in an even bigger conflict called the 80 Years' War. It didn't go well. In fact, he was taken prisoner for a number of years. The one silver lining of this time in his life was a rare white poodle given to him as a gift. That dog, despite being a poodle, turned out to be an absolute savage. It wasn't long after being liberated that he and his dog boy were called on by King Charles. Well, he called on Rupert. The dog just came with him. As a commander in King Charles' royalist army, he showed promise. His ridiculous childhood had made him brave and aggressive. Rumours spread of him extorting locals within cities captured by royalists, of him executing prisoners, and even of him burning the town of Birmingham to the ground. But there were also rumours of witchcraft. In those days, most people believed in magic and curses, with accusations of witchcraft taken very seriously. Unlike other accusations, it was Rupert's dog Boy who was said to be the witch. Apparently Boy was a witch from northern Finland who disguised herself as a dog. He was able to speak multiple languages, predict the future accurately, and create gold from thin air. It was also said he protected Rupert by catching bullets fired in their direction in his mouth. Some even said Boy was the devil himself in disguise, and that King Charles had made a deal with him to win the war. Propaganda about the dog was spread far and wide, turning many superstitious Englishmen against the royalists. In battle, people would search out the dog, hoping to be the one to kill it. I imagine it was the only point in human history that bragging about killing a tiny poodle would actually impress people. They finally got to Boy in 1644. It's unclear how he was killed, but according to legend he was shot dead, causing Boy to transform back into his original form as a witch, the witch then vanished in front of those present. Many attributed the eventual loss of King Charles in the war to the death of this witch, and in a sense they might have been right. Propaganda focusing on the dog really undermined royalist attempts to win popular support they needed. What's weird is that the whole thing started off as a royalist joke. They would joke that their enemies probably believe the dog is a witch, in order to make them look irrational and superstitious. But they had no idea how irrational and superstitious people were back then, so their satire detailing Boy's magical powers was mistaken as fact. So that was a mistake. Boy became so famous that other European monarchs decided they also wanted a dog like him. I think it's incredible people focused on Prince Rupert's dog considering he also had a pet monkey. I've never heard of someone owning a monkey who wasn't crazy, and in those days it was much more difficult to acquire a monkey, so we can only imagine how mad he was. At the end of the English Civil War, Prince Rupert was only 32. As his side lost, he was exiled, and so he became a pirate in the Caribbean. He was eventually made governor of the Hudson Bay Company, North America's dominant fur trading business. They controlled much of British North American territory. That's why so much of Canada came to be known as Rupert's Land. It was the land controlled by Prince Rupert through the Hudson Bay Company. European empires liked to gain influence in other continents through semi-independent companies. With the protection of the state, such companies would dominate vital industries, like the fur trade in Canada or the dye trade in India. After local communities were dependent on these companies, it was much easier for their parent empires to take over. That's why there was a British, Dutch, French, and Portuguese East India Company. The Hudson Bay Company still exists, but Prince Rupert does not. He died ages ago.